Are you dealing with teams that are being sarcastic or cynical? Perhaps you are the leader of a new team, and the previous manager that was working with this team had been so negative that the team has now become cynical, even that that leader has moved on, and you're now leading that team. Maybe you're somebody who's doing a merger integration where you're moving teams from one location to another, and the location that you're moving the team from, the previous people that used to interact, actually the other people who used to interact with the team that is actually leaving the organization, they're starting to be cynical towards your new team, thinking that, oh, these guys, what do they know? They're rookies, right? Oh, gone are the good services we used to expect from this team. Maybe you're experiencing that. Maybe you are a team member of other colleagues that had also that are being cynical, and your positivity is just annoying, right? So if you're experiencing that, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what are some of the challenges you're facing in your organization. This is my second live today. Actually, what happened is, this is funny. I really appreciate one of the guests really letting me know, but for some reason I didn't see the comment in my posts here. It didn't show up. But actually, I did the entire live on mute. And so, guys, this is what happens, right? This is live. You really don't know what to expect, but it really happens like that. So it's great. I'm doing a second run. So I don't want you to miss out on this important topic. So I'd love to share this. Because this is a topic I talked about this week. It has to do with cynicism and sarcasm. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because it's such an important thing that many of our organizations and our society, actually, it's quite prevalent. And sometimes when you look at a cynical person, we think he's cool, he's like a coolest person in the party, he's funny, he's being cynical. And sometimes people who are not cynical, they pretend to be cynical because they think it's cool, when actually it's not. It really isn't. If we haven't met before, my name is Fahim Karim, and I am an employee engagement expert, and I work with companies that are faith and value based. By faith, I mean companies like Chick-fil-A. It's like if you're listening to it from overseas and you don't have a Chick-fil-A in your country, that's all right. But it's basically a food chain that is based on they do really great service, but it's faith-based organization. And by value-based, I think of organizations like IKEA. They manufacture amazing things that provide such great value to people. So I help this type of organizations. It doesn't have to be that large, medium and small size organization that are also dealing with things like, projects are delayed, communications are ineffective, systems are not as efficient as they need to be, and there's a high turnover, right? And the corporate culture is really suffering. So I help them by creating a safe container where everyone gets to vocalize their opinions and their ideas. Managers get to lead and listen. Employees feel empowered and part of the team. And most importantly, your company continues to grow and innovate. So I'd love to hear from you. Put in the comments below, where are you signing in from? If you're watching this later, love to hear your comments on what are some of the things you're facing as an organization or as a team when it comes to cynicism and sarcasm. If we as someone with more than 22 years of experience in working for a global organization, and someone who has also lived in 4 different continents, I've seen the beauty of different cultures, but at the same time, I've also seen how different cultures are working in one cross-functional, one project as part of a cross-functional team. How, if we don't get this right, it can really impact how the teams actually work, the productivity. And this is not just me saying it, this is based on research. One of the authors, I really love her work, is Brene Brown. And Brene, she's a very famous researcher here in the U.S., and she's a research professor based in Houston. Not only that, she's a 5 times winner of the New York Times bestseller, and she has worked with more than 50 organizations and 10,000 individuals, and so her research work really has a lot of depth. So one of the things Renee mentions about cynicism and sarcasm is that while that is something on the surface, but underneath all of that is actually despair. Right? People are like the despair. The definition of despair it might come up as, the thought that the next day, tomorrow is going to be the same as today, right? And that's almost like it's never going to change. Things are always like this, and sometimes it's not our fault. Like you and I are exposed to different things in life. Perhaps it's the misinformation given by media, or our experience with the politicians, or experience with pharmaceuticals. All those things make us sometimes cynical. And is there such a time when it is good to be cynical? I'd love to ask you that. I'd love to hear that from you in your comments. Let me know, is there such a time when it is good to be cynical? Actually, there is. One of the time is when you have a negative thought about your own self. That's a good time to be cynical and say, you know what? Why am I thinking negatively about myself right now? Why? And is it me really thinking about this? Most of the time, it's not. Those negative thoughts are not our own thoughts. And so that is a good time to be cynical and say, you know what? I'm not going to listen to all this negative talk about why I'm not going to be able to do this. Why don't I do the things that are needed? In order to get something done, there are a couple of things that needs to be there. One of them, like I want to share with you, is, let me see if I have it here, is attitude, effort, and focus, right? So those are the things we can address. Our attitude is what determines our response, right? If you're facing a challenge, if our attitude is positive, we'll show up with positivity, and people can see that energy, right? And the next one is our effort, right? That is something within our control. By us putting the effort the right way with the right means, we can then hope for the right results. Not always the results are up to results. We don't have control over that, but we do have control of our attitude, and we have control of our efforts. And lastly, is to focus, have the right focus, because then when we're focused on that, we will be able to overcome those so-called challenges sometimes we make up in our mind to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So let me know, where are you signing in from? If you're watching this recording later on, I'd love to hear from you to find out what are your thoughts about this topic and what are some of the challenges you're seeing. So what is the definition? I wanted to look at the definition of cynicism and sarcasm. So according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, sarcasm is a sharp and often satirical or ironic utterance designed to cut or give pain to the other person, right? So it's an expression in the form of irony that is intended to cut or wound the person. Like it means the opposite of what is actually said. Like an example is, they're really on top of things, right? The person who's saying that sarcastic statement, it really means the opposite. It means like they're really not on top of things, but they're saying it in a way, and we sometimes say that too, right? They're really on top of things, and sometimes you'll hear us say like, oh, those guys over there, and so we become cynical. These are expressions that we don't even realize, and it hurts people who are hearing that. Like sometimes we may have colleagues or team members we're working with that we may not realize, but when they say that we're going to deliver this, we're hoping to get this delivered to you, then we might say like, we'll see. That attitude itself is like, oh, okay, this person already has a negative expectation of us. So, as a leader, our expression of what we expect from the team or the team member we're dealing with will either help them or it will demotivate them. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of cynicism. And sometimes we may not even think that we're cynical, right? But actually, let me ask you these questions. You can do a self-assessment. Number one, if someone is nice to you and you think about what does this person want, do you really, if someone is being nice to you, you ask yourself, what does this person want from me? Do you ask yourself that question? Okay. Do you constantly feel misunderstood? Okay. When things are going well and everything is looking good, but you are now all of a sudden afraid something's going to go wrong, right? And then are we quick to notice the faults of other people, right? And then do we worry about constantly being taken advantage of? Sometimes maybe we've had some bad experience in the past, but now we bring that experience and then we project it on every single team member that we're working with. And sometimes it's so hard. It's so hard when, as a leader, when we have that mindset, good people, it's hard for them to rise to our expectation, right? So ask ourselves, and sometimes are we being sarcastic? These are questions we can ask ourselves. Do we worry sometimes that people can't seem to get it together? These are self-assessment questions to identify whether we're being cynical or not, right? And so you will see, actually, in our culture is quite prevalent. And sometimes what's the worst part of cynicism is that when we actually are like that, we feel like we don't need help, and it makes us arrogant, and we think we know better than others. And that's really dangerous, to be in dangerous situation to be. So what's the solution? What are the number one solutions I recommend? I recommend, and this is something I've done, applied myself, and I've seen tremendous result, is to intentionally or voluntarily be naive. What do I mean by that? Like one organization I was working with, and they were partnering, they were being asked to partner with another organization, and the people of that organization, this team, let's say team A, didn't have a high expectation of team B. Rather, they were actually very pessimistic and had negative thoughts about team B. And they shared some of the information, and I actually know some of that information about team B, and I still saw and tried to bring this both team to work collaboratively. And so I was asked, Fahim, I think you're being too naive. My response was, you know what? I am intentionally being naive. Why? I voluntarily want to be naive. Why? Because I want to look for the good in everyone. I want to see that team B has great potential. Everybody has that. And I want to focus on that. Because if we want to focus on negativity on each one of us, if we want to find dirt on each one of us, there's plenty to go around, right? Just ourselves. There's a beautiful quote I love. I think it's from the scriptures. Is that when we point one finger to someone, there's three fingers pointing right at us, right? And sometimes we are pointing at a speck on somebody's eyes when there is a big log stuck in our own, right? And so rather than letting your teams know that you have a low expectation, that you're being cynical, I'll see, even maybe you're a teacher and your student comes up to you and says, teacher, I know I've not submitted my homeworks last 3 weeks, 3 times that you had depended on me, and trust me, I'm going to get it done this time. Rather than saying, we'll see, okay, I will wait for that. So let people rise to your positive expectation. As a leader, if you inherited a team that previously might have had a bad experience with that leader that was here previously, then it's our job to uplift this team. How do we do that? First of all, in leadership, and this is also what Bernie recommends, is to not reward cynicism and sarcasm and actually not tolerate it. Because if we tolerate this at the leadership level, and that behavior is modeled at that leadership level, then it just destroys the culture, right? And especially if you have a global organization and you start to see cynicism and sarcasm going through emails and text, people coming from different cultures and languages, and this is prevalent, it becomes a toxic environment. So at the leadership level, you cannot afford to have that. So as a leader of that organization, the first thing is, I'm not going to tolerate cynicism or sarcasm in my teams, period. Secondly, to offset that, because while cynicism is in the surface, the underlying thing under cynicism is despair. So to offset that, what she recommends, and I agree with this, is that instead of cynicism and sarcasm, to offset that is to cultivate hope and reward kindness, right? And so these are the two things that actually is the antidote: kindness and hope. Give people hope. But maybe your team is like they don't have high expectation. Maybe they have a very negative expectation of this organization. Nothing ever gets changed. Nothing ever gets better. And as a manager, you may be like, I agree with that sometimes. Nothing happens. But what can you do? What is within your realm? Be upfront. Be honest about it. Let them know that, hey guys, I'm going to be upfront with you. I'm going to communicate to you everything that is relevant, and I will communicate to you as soon as I have it, right? And then ask them this question, like, let me know, how can I support you? What does support from me look like, right? And is there any questions I can help answer for you? And then focus on small wins, right? Each team member maybe who is being cynical is because they were given such large unrealistic goals that they couldn't achieve. Maybe people sometimes as organizations they say, oh, we really give out great bonuses, right? But what happens is that target that the company sets is so hard to achieve that bonus is meaningless. Like, I'm never going to achieve that, right? What's the point? It actually makes them more demotivated. So if you're that leader, make goals realistic. Break them down to small, achievable goals for this week. Rather than giving them like 20 different things to work on, maybe just 2 things each day. Or maybe 7 things in 1 week, or 5 things in 1 week that one individual can work on. And that's something that will help them get out of this cynical mindset if that's what they're suffering from. So I'd love to hear from you before I continue further. What are some of the things you're seeing in your organization when it comes to cynicism? Lastly, I'm going to leave you with a poem. This subject is so dear to my heart that I actually wrote a poem. So bear with me as I read it to you. It's called A Poem on Cynicism and Sarcasm. If you're surrounded by negativity, choose to be naive voluntarily. Cry as you may at times of hardships. Know that God is unrelenting in His love for you and is most forgiving. Live life as if it's your last day. Don't head towards despair, for it is only in the darkest of nights that we get to witness the stars that are bright. Why become hopeless when you were created for greatness? Don't give in to sadness, for others are desperately in need of your kindness. Love unconditionally, for it leads to contentment. The light of that type of love will always outshine any disappointment. If you think you are not cynical, answer these few questions. Do I get annoyed when people are overly optimistic? When someone is nice to me, do I wonder what about this person is more realistic? If I feel joy, do I fear a sudden disappointment? Living our lives with cynicism makes it hard for us to grow. Life's too precious. So step up from the slopes onto the plateau. As a leader, raise their confidence, for you are here to serve. Reward hope and kindness and not sarcasm. Gentleness makes you more beautiful. Spend less time being cynical. Don't fear being disappointed, for life truly is far more meaningful. With that, my friend, until we meet next time, God willing, I look forward to hearing from you. Until we meet next time, tread softly, speak kindly, and love unconditionally.